Taylor, you have new notifications on your Discord.
Okay. What just happened? Computer, how many people are on my Discord? Computer, how many people are on my Discord?
As of right now, there are 856 current members.
What the flip? I released one witty video a week ago today, and all of a sudden I have 3K subscribers? The video I released has over 100,000 views and almost nearly as many likes. I have only released one video. I mean, I'm flattered. I just didn't think it would be that easy. Apparently, I'm not the only one who waited a very, very long time for the Undertale AUs to be made into actual games. So when I said I was gonna make it myself, I have awakened the entire Undertale community. I suppose I could just make a video talking about its development. The Undertale AU community is really something. I mean, when it wants what it wants, it's gonna get it.
Warning, long development ramble detected.
So far, within the 1 week that I released the video, the only project I've been able to work on is just UNDERFELL. And even then, I've only been able to get past the Napstablook fight. Normally, I would have gotten a lot farther within that given amount of time, except managing a Discord server with that many people is a living nightmare. However, a lot of really good things came from that Discord server. I have received so many sprite submissions, submissions for music. I've received lots of artwork, thankfully not NSFW. You know, the community was really dedicated in helping me finish this project. So now I have so many people supporting me in this, and honestly, I am really flattered. So let's talk about what changes I made and also what I plan on doing in the future. With the sprites, I was able to not only use other people's sprites that they designed specifically for my mod, and therefore they gave me permission by telling me that. There's also been a lot of music submissions, and if the song wasn't published by the person who shares it with me, I have to directly ask permission from that person to be able to use it. First, I had to change the sprites of UNDERFELL since all the characters weren't as nice as the originals. So I started working on development myself, but then I got a lot of help from a whole bunch of talented sprite artists, and now I've managed to get a lot farther than I could have. I made it a goal so that anytime I use anyone else's content, I make sure that I actually credit it so everyone knows that it wasn't me who made it. Like, I can do a lot of things, but I'm not really good at this kind of thing. Since I'm using the modern version of Undertale, I learned that Translatale is no longer supporting future versions of Undertale, so that meant I had to use a different software. But thankfully, I found a much better software simply called Undertale Mod Tool. And with that software, well, it does exactly what it says, it's a mod tool. But not only does it allow me to change sprites, dialogues, and sounds like Translatale used to be able to do, it also allows me to do a lot more. Now I can do the very things that I said I could do. For instance, I can now modify the rooms, which means I could not only change the ones that are already there, I can also make brand new ones, and I can also change the order of those rooms so that I have my own layout of the map, not just custom sprites. I also figured out how to change the code that tells the game how to behave. For example, in UNDERFELL, Flowey is nice to you, which means it wouldn't make sense for him to try to kill you if he's nice. So one thing I had to do as a temporary solution is to allow Flowey to speak nicely to you, and he tells you to dodge the bullets instead of catch them. And when he does, his music does not go down like it does in Undertale. Thankfully, I removed that line of code. When I installed the UNDERFELL version of the better graphics mod that I'm developing alongside with classic UNDERFELL, I learned that the flower bed that you fall upon when you first enter the underground has these 3 green tiles that are meant to blend in with the grass. And unfortunately, since the texture below those tiles have changed, the tiles now stick out since they are ever so slightly outside of the flower bed. So in order to fix that, 2 of them I moved off screen, while the 3rd one I had to cover up by making 2 more flower beds and putting them all right next to each other to make it look like one, but now it covers up that last tile. I've received a lot of feedback from the community regarding all 3 AUs, and I've learned a lot of things I didn't originally know about those AUs. For instance, the version of Frisk from Underfell that I'm familiar with has the same exact look as Frisk from Undertale, except for the fact that her clothes are black instead of blue, and instead of pink, they are red stripes. That's the Frisk I'm familiar with. Turns out, that's only fanon Underfell Frisk, while the canon version of Frisk, created by Underfella, the original developer of that mod, had a different design style for the character. Apparently, in classic Underfell, Frisk still has the same outfit, more or less, that we see in Undertale. The only difference is that you can see the obvious change in the color of her pants, and you can also see black stripes also on her shirt alongside with the pink and blue. So now it's just slightly different. So with the help of some really talented sprite artists, we managed to create this really cool looking sprite of Frisk, where not only is she wearing the outfit that is seen in classic Underfell, but she also now has a bandage and bangs. That's actually really nice design. I love it. I do like the bangs, though I still like the classic Undertale style of Frisk's hair. And then I realized there's a comic for Underfell that I watched many years ago, back before the comics were actually, more relevant to Undertale itself, back when the AU community just barely started growing. Because nowadays, the comic dubs are just... Moving on, that old comic that I saw is a comic interpretation of what the game Underfell would have looked like, but it's in comic form, so you'll see some interaction between Flowey and Frisk, since Flowey in canon Underfell is with you throughout the entire journey. I think it's really clever that once she made it to Toriel's home, she then realizes her clothes are all bad and torn, so she needs a change of outfit. So she changes to the fanon outfit. Genius! This means I now can give players the choice between the old and the new version of Underfell Frisk. All I have to do is figure out how to allow the player to switch between the two. The code in Undertale is there, and I can edit it with the tool I have. So we know it's possible. Now, how much of it have I actually changed? Not really much. The most I've done in terms of code manipulation is just the conversation you first have when you meet Flowey, since he can't be mean to you anymore. And like, putting aside the dialogue changes, I also made it so that he displays the appropriate face, followed by the lack of music going downwards when you dodge his bullets, because now you're supposed to dodge them. And also, with that, that's the only real thing I've changed so far, code-wise, and the only thing I've changed room-wise is just adding those flowers to the flower bed. But it's clear to me that it's possible. At this point, I'm just making this up as I go along. The plan is to have 2 sets of sprites instead of 1 for Frisk. One of them is going to be the classic Underfell shirt and outfit, while the other one is going to have the more fan version. Apparently, in Underfell lore, the nation's colors of the Underground is black and red, which is probably why most of the characters in Underfell have such colors. And apparently, that color scheme symbolizes loyalty to King Asgore. So that would make sense that Frisk would find such clothes in Toriel's home, since Toriel was the former queen to King Asgore. So I guess that actually makes sense. Now, of course, I am doing my best to manage expectations, but the plan is to try to give the player the option between the two sprites, and then whichever one they choose, I'm probably going to make that decision final for the rest of that run during that choice. So that's everything I can tell you regarding Frisk. Next up is Flowey. I already mentioned that I changed the way he talks to you and how he approaches you when you first meet him. And I like the fact that he's nice to you now, but it's not what I have in mind for the end result. It's more of like a temporary solution. See, I plan on just making Underfell nothing more than a skin, as I've mentioned in the previous video. And then, eventually, I'll be able to change the mechanics. With the Undertale mod tool, it is actually possible now. It's just hard work, and it's something I also need to figure out how to do in the first place. But of course, I figured out all the things I needed to figure out so far, and so far using the mod tool has actually been really easy, so I'm sure I'll figure it out. One idea that came to my mind that I would really like is the idea that Underfell has of being able to take Flowey with you. Because in Undertale, Flowey has spent the whole game spying on you and then making his attack during any of the endings. But in Underfell, things have changed. Because normally in Undertale lore, Flowey, after becoming Flowey, he becomes evil because he gets bored. After enough times he's seen every inch of the very game he's inside of, in which he's actually self-conscious of the fact that it is a game, when he's explored every nook and cranny of this tiny game he exists in, he gets bored. So he decides he wants to kill everyone. That's why he's evil in Undertale. So it would make sense that in Underfell, since all the characters are not only more aggressive, but also like more powerful to some extent, since they have a little bit more experience in combat, it would make sense that Flowey no longer had the ability to overpower them in the first place, which would mean he never became evil, which would mean that's what happens when you first meet him. He tries to help you for a change, because he's never reached that negative character development. Despite the fact that he's still helping you out, he is still the sassy flower that we're familiar with. That, and also, you know, there's a chance he might turn on you. If I'm going to have Flowey be able to be carried around, I realized that officially, in both the original Underfell canon, and also as a crossover during Underverse 0.2, you'll see Frisk carrying a flower pot holding Flowey inside. That actually sounds like a good idea in theory. But in practice, I've seen some sprite artists attempt to make that, and it works, but the problem is they have to make the face of Flowey smaller, and there's no longer enough room for his face to fit in anymore. It doesn't work. So now we've run into the first of my problems. One idea that I had in mind is maybe I could have Frisk carry the flower pot with both hands, and the only compromise I'll have to make is just the fact that when he's holding him in front of him, you can't see Frisk's face when you face forward, but maybe you can still see him when you face the side or when he's turned around. And which would make sense, except one, there's going to be some need to change the dimensions of the sprite, which thankfully I figured out how to do when I was prototyping UNDERSWAP Papyrus. And then the second thing I'll have to do is make sure that, you know, Frisk doesn't need to use their hands while simultaneously holding the flower pot. I also thought it would be very interesting if I came up with brand new dialogue strings for Flowey, so that whenever you interact with anything during any part of the game, Flowey has his own reactions to it. That sounds interesting. So, the ruins. The general idea I have for the ruins is just to give it a red color scheme instead of purple. That's what I've seen in a lot of different interpretations of Underfell, so I'll do that. And, well, when you first meet Flowey, he's trying to kill you, and then you're saved by Toriel. But now Flowey's nice. You don't need to be saved in the first place. And also, at the same time, Toriel is nuts. Have you seen the drawing I showed you in the other video? So now, Toriel is an enemy you want to avoid. Because as far as I understand with Underfell, she wants to keep you in the ruins forever. But not as much in the sense of the whole happy mother like in Toriel in Undertale. But it's a little bit more sinister. So I can imagine you'll encounter Toriel later in the chapter rather than having her save you from Flowey. And from there, she'll take you to her house, and that's how you get the outfit change. And then from there, you'll actually be able to, try to leave, only for Toriel to start opposing. Also, during the moment when you would normally change clothes, it's not officially canon that Frisk has anything other than a flower pot to contain Flowey, but I figured it's not really a good idea to constantly be carrying a flower pot around. So what if we did a backpack? So, during the transition, when you are in Toriel's home, not only do you change your outfit into the Fanon style from the classic, if you choose that option, but you'll also make your hair style different, where it will no longer have the bangs that the artist created. It will then have regular Undertale Frisk's hair. And thirdly, you'll put down the flower pot, or at least put it inside. You'll actually have a backpack to put the flower pot inside. So now Flowey can ride with you on your back, so you don't have to carry him all the time. So now your hands are finally free. Alright, next up, I looked at all of the side characters within the Runes chapter and tweaked them one by one. First off, I went to the battle sprites and I just made them all red. That's all I did. At least that's what I did at first for classic graphics. And for better graphics, I just gave them the Undertale better graphics sprites and called it good, at least for the start. And then once I did that, I went through each and every battle and overworld sprite and changed it one at a time so that it's more Underfell styled. So, Frogget. What I did for him was I just simply gave him a scar, made him look grumpy, and added 2 spines on the side of his head. That's all I did visually on both overworld and battle sprites. But then I also decided I should give him Final Frogget's attacks. So it's Undertale hard mode. But since Final Frogget also appears in the core, I have to give Final Frogget custom attacks entirely, which would mean I'd have to make new attacks. So that's what I did. I mean, of course, I was going to put Final Frogget to replace normal Frogget, but again, he appears in the core, so I had to make them separate entities still. That being said, I'm going to have to figure it out once I get to the core chapter, because I'll have to make new battle mechanics. But by then, I'll actually know how to do that, because I'm going to have to come up with new battles anyway once I get to the Snowden chapter, so I'm sure I'll figure that out. And then the next character was Whimsalum. And I figured it would be lame to copy and paste the aggressive style to all the characters, so I felt like some of them could be considered weak among the others, and I felt like Whimsalum felt like one of those characters. So he's still going to be the scared character that we're familiar with, but he's going to have a slightly broken wing, but still can fly with it, and he's also going to have Whimsalot's attacks, and that's it. Of course, once I actually get to Whimsalot, I'm going to have to, once again, come up with custom attacks, so again, I'll deal with that later. Third character is Moldsmal. With Moldsmal, he's just a blob, and it's kind of hard to make a blob edgy. So I just made him red and called it good, but then I realized there are 2 other versions of Moldsmal, one in Undertale hard mode and one in Waterfall's chapter. In Waterfall's chapter, there's another character called Moldbig, which imitates Moldsmal, but over time, you'll realize it's a different person, because not only does he not animate like Moldsmal does, but he also can't be spared easily. And eventually, he opens up and reveals the inside of himself, which reveals that he's actually a separate monster entirely. And I figured that would be a good idea if I replaced Moldsmal with Moldbig and called that good. Of course, I also have to make it red, but yes, that's what I have in mind. And then once you actually get to the Waterfall chapter, I'll replace Moldbig with Moldessa. That way, we'll have these 2 versions of the characters, but still given the style that feels appropriate to Underfell. And then the 4th character was Loops. with Luke's, I was going to give him his Undertale hard mode counterpart, but then it hit me that his Undertale hard mode counterpart also appears in the core, so I decided instead I'll just make him look more aggressive and call it good, just like I did with Froggy. So I got a sprite artist to design some scratches on his eyelid and make him look grumpier and stuff like that and call that good. And of course I also gave him his hard mode counterpart's battle attacks. And then the fifth character is Migos. With Migos, I was going to give him his Undertale hard mode counterpart since he doesn't appear in the core, but then I realized that he looks a little bit goofy and that he doesn't really look all that scary. And I felt like it would be better if I just made Migos stay hostile and he doesn't turn friendly even after a spare, because you'll have to find some other way to spare him instead and call that good. Though I did think it would be a good idea to at least give him Migos' attacks. So there you have it. And then the last character is Vegetoid. I mean, Vegetoid, I was going to just Underfellize, but then I realized Parsnick, his Undertale hard mode counterpart, actually looks edgy already. And since Undertale hard mode isn't officially a thing, at least a complete game, it's only the first chapter, I could bring Vegetoid to regular Undertale and just basically color him red and call that good. And I felt like that actually would work, because now, since this is since it's pretty much Undertale hard mode, the sharp teeth that Parsnick has actually fits with the Underfell theme, so I felt like that actually makes sense. So there we go, I went for that. And that's all the side characters for the Ruins chapter. And once I eventually get to the other chapters, I'll either Underfellize them, or I'll find their Undertale hard mode counterparts. But since there is no Undertale hard mode chapters after the Ruins, I don't think there are any, which would mean I'd have to just, edgify them, if that makes sense. And then of course I'll have to see if I can make custom attacks entirely, or more difficult attacks, so that it fits the theme of Undertale hard mode. And that's probably as close as I can get for that. But once I finish the Ruins chapter, I'm going to put Underfell on hold. I'm going to release it as a build so everyone can access the most recent version of Underfell, but then I'm going to put that on pause and focus on Project 2, UNDERSWAP. Once I do that, I can make the Ruins chapter of that game instead. And then that means I'm going to have to change those sprites, I'm going to change those things of dialogue, change a lot of mechanics, because after all, UNDERSWAP is probably the most difficult of the three. My plan for UNDERSWAP is to take all the rooms in the Ruins and mirror its layout. I mean, I might add some more rooms to Underfell's Ruins just to make the game a little bit more difficult, but I'm debating on that and I'm not entirely sure if I want to do that. I guess I'll decide once I get to that point, but with UNDERSWAP, one thing I've definitely decided is to mirror the layout of all the rooms and call that good. Oh, and also change the color palette from purple to cyan, since I've seen almost every interpretation of UNDERSWAP use that color for the Ruins. And of course, Toriel is going to be replaced with Asgore, Frisk is going to be replaced with Kara, and then all of the Ruins characters, I'll figure out who's officially swapped, and then all the ones that don't have any official character swap, I'll just come up with my own, and I'll take my own liberties, because I'd rather have all of them trade places, because, I mean, they've never really mentioned that all of them had an official swap, and some even say not all of them have been swapped, but I don't like the idea of only swapping a couple of the characters. I feel like I should stick with the theme and swap all the characters, so I'm gonna have to figure it out. Like, I could, in theory, swap Whimsalem and Frogget, for example. After all, that is what Jakei did when they were animating UNDERSWAP in Underverse, so I could do that. Anyways, I'll figure out that. The battle mechanics I'm going to have to figure out how to change, but I'll get to that later. The dummy I'm going to replace with the Mad Dummy from the Waterfall the Waterfall chapter with the garbage dump. And then, of course, that would mean once you get to that boss fight, there is no Mad Dummy, because it's just the same training dummy you encounter in the Ruins. So I'm gonna have to figure that one out, but I'm sure I can pull it off. And then Napstablook is gonna be replaced with Metaton, but without his robot form. So he's just gonna be a pink ghost with hair, and that's what it's gonna be. Because as far as I understand, if I'm not mistaken, Alphys, before she became the royal scientist, was friends with Caddy and Bratty, and she loved digging in garbage and like finding things like anime and whatnot. So I'm pretty sure she became the royal scientist by impressing Asgore with Metaton's creation. But if I'm not mistaken, now I don't remember this, I'm just naming this off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure that Metaton was a ghost. That, you know, because it would make sense, because that's why Metaton has a house that resembles Napstablook, and it's right next to his house, and it mentions that Alphys gave him a new body, so it would make sense that he actually was a ghost originally. And I figured, since we've never really seen his ghost, I can just use the interpretation that the internet came up with, where he's just pink Napstablook with Metaton's hair coming off. So I'll just use that and call it good. So that's Napstablook, and I believe that's everything I can mention regarding my plans for UNDERSWAP. And then there's OUTERTALE. Once I finish the UNDERSWAP chapter, I'm going to work on OUTERTALE's first chapter, the SS Toriellis. I'm going to make sure that first the cutscene is polished and looks nicer, and then you're going to see yourself crashed on a distant asteroid. Then you're going to be saved from Flowey by Toriel, who then takes you to her ship, which by then I'll actually have better than these crappy drawings that I used in the prototype. I'll actually have probably better sprites by then. And then once you actually go into the Toriellis, I'm going to have to change the layout entirely to fit more like a actual spaceship. So I might have to change the ruins a lot. I guess I'll have to find out then. I guess I might like try to stylize the characters to look more like OUTERTALE versions, but I'll figure that out then. Once I finish all 3 versions of the first chapter for each of the 3 AUs, I'll then move on to the next chapter for all 3 projects, from UNDERFELL to UNDERSWAP then OUTERTALE, and I'll keep doing that with every chapter I have until I eventually finish the game. So with the prototypes I released, I feel like it would be better, for copyright reasons, that I keep it exclusively on the Discord and make that something that's only accessible to the insiders. So that would mean anything else I create I can release on other places, but the prototypes will stay on the Discord only. With the other versions, like version 0.1.1 of UNDERFELL that I already released, and any other future build for any of the projects, I'm going to also see if I can release the modern versions of them on Game Banana, Game Jolt, and ModDB. And then that way, the internet has much better access to the mods. But I customized them in such a way that they are anti-piracy. Because, come on, you're not a dirty pirate, right? Here's the thing. What I did was I completely removed the exe, and all that there is just the data.win file and all the OGG files, the credits for UNDERFELL, that so you know who made what, and also a video that I submitted that basically tells you how to install the project. So once you take all of those files, and then you basically follow the instructions of the video so that you can install it onto the project, onto the game, and from there you'll be able to have access to the latest builds I release. Of course, I'm still changing things up as I go. Just because I finished the UNDERFELL chapter of the ruins doesn't mean I'm not going to touch it ever again. I could polish it later if someone gives me a suggestion that I like, or if I'm not satisfied with it. So again, everything is subject to change, and eventually I'll finish it, but it's going to take a very, very, very long time to complete it. But this progress isn't going anywhere, and neither is the project itself. Let's put it this way. I've seen a lot of very passionate projects be created for UNDERTALE fan games, and I've seen a lot of them get canceled, and that's really sad, and I just can't imagine that happening to my project. There's a lot of projects I have a lot of high hopes for, like Team Switched UNDERSWAP. Because here's the thing, in the last video, I mentioned how I don't like that version of UNDERSWAP. That's because there's more than one version of UNDERSWAP. In that version, sure, the characters trade roles, but their personalities are retained. which would mean Papyrus has a hood, but it's in the same color scheme as his battle body, which means it's mostly white, but his hood is red. It looks like a hood version of his battle body, which I'd rather just stick with the orange one that classic UNDERSWAP uses. My point is, while I'm not a fan of that version of UNDERSWAP, I still love the fact that someone is making that version of UNDERSWAP into a game. People are actually passionate about it. I don't want people to think that I'm crapping on these projects, because these are actually amazing projects, and I really hope they see the light of day. Even if it's not my forte, I still hope it actually becomes a finished thing. As for my project, now that I've started it, it is not gonna stop until it is finished. Regardless if I'm still working on the project, I've basically gotten the attention of the entire community that I've been working on it, at least in the past. So for whatever reason, if I end up not working on the project, the community, without a doubt, is gonna continue where I left off. I made everything I have been submitting publicly available, so everyone has access to what I've been doing. They also have access to the mod tool I've been using, simply called UNDERTALE mod tool. So once people figure out how to use it, anyone can mod UNDERTALE in any way they want. Which means, if for whatever reason I lose motivation on the project, someone is gonna continue where I left off. It's gonna happen. The community is so passionate, it's just gonna happen. Though, of course, I have no plans on canceling this project. This project, I have been waiting years for it to be a thing. I am not gonna give up on this project. The worst case scenario, I might take a long break, but I am not canceling this project. During the creation of this video, which actually took multiple days, so it wasn't exactly a week ago today as of the time I'm talking now that I've seen my video, basically I saw this mod that is almost entirely complete, and it's called UNDERTALE Bits and Pieces. It's effectively a revamp of the entire UNDERTALE campaign, where not only is it full of resprites, for those of you who don't know what that is, it's just sprites that are basically the same fan-made versions of the official sprites, so that they have a different art style, but they're still the same characters, which means Sans still has his blue hood, he still has his UNDERTALE personality, but he looks just a teeny bit different, because of this new art style. And of course, that's one thing they did. They also made all the mechanics better. They also even implemented Deltarune mechanics into UNDERTALE. Like, for example, the ability for Frisk to sprint. They also added in entirely new rooms, entirely new characters, and entirely new fights. Honestly, I think the mod is amazing. It's not complete, sure, but compared to a lot of other projects, this one is almost done. It's all, I played one run already, and I managed to get to the Asgore fight before it had any issues. Of course, it's not finished, but it's so close to completion, I have high hopes that they are going to see it through to the end. And I really hope a lot of other projects get that same kind of treatment. Some fan games are already complete, like DustTale. I mean, DustTale is supposedly a alternate timeline of UNDERTALE, where after enough genocide routes, Sans is sick of the same exact events repeating over and over. So he wants to try things differently for a change as an attempt to stop you. So knowing that you're going to reset the game, he wants to see if he can lose all of his morality and gain as much LV as possible by killing his friends and family, and once he does that, try fighting the human to see if he can stop them. Of course, that's not exactly the best way to go, but of course, I guess from his perspective it's his only option, since everything else he's tried doesn't seem to have worked, and he knows eventually the game is going to get reset. But honestly, if the player chooses not to reset, that's kind of a big risk. But my point is, this idea is already a complete game on GameJolt. Go look it up, or look at the Noteworthy Fan Projects channel on my Discord. That shows all the projects that I find interesting enough to be, well, noteworthy. This mod is in active development. It's gonna get finished. And I really hope that people not only get to take a look at my mod and continue to improve it, but people can also make their own versions of my mod by using the mod tool to change things. Like if they don't like my choice of sprites, they can use their own. They can also change the sounds, they can change the music, they can make it their own. Not only that, but I've provided a way where people can make AU mods, just like I'm doing, with whatever AU they want. Personally, I'm only gonna do UNDERSWAP, UNDERFELL, and OUTERTALE. Honestly, I don't need the others, but I know people want those as games just as badly. So, if someone wants it bad enough, someone is gonna make it into a game. Someone can take inspiration from what I did and also knowledge of how to use the UNDERTALE mod tool and put the 2 and 2 together to make whatever AU they want into a game. So basically, at this point, I have basically prepared a way for the community to create the games they've always dreamed of making. Of course, I didn't make the software, but I did publicly announce that this can be done. And now that everyone knows it, I really hope people actually have that kind of motivation. Personally, I'm not a fan of a lot of the AUs, and that's just my personal opinion. Anyone else can disagree, and I'm fine with that. But they also have the ability to make the games their own. So if people don't like the way I did it, they can make it themselves. And honestly, that's really good to hear. The fact that this is all open source content, that anyone can edit it however they want, that's really uplifting to hear. So I really would like to see what people do with not only my mod, but also Undertale's itself, and also other mods other people created. For example, there's a mod called UNDERTALE Together. It's a really cool mod for Undertale that adds a second player to the game. I have always wanted that. And now that it's an unofficial thing, I am really excited to see what people do, because I'm pretty sure that mod was made using the mod tool. And now that people know that I can make AUs with the mod tool, what if someone combines my mod with Undertale Together? I mean, I might end up doing that if I have motivation, but I might not, because I might be either overwhelmed or simply lazy. But someone is gonna do it. Someone could also port my mod to Undertale bits and pieces. They might combine all 3, my AUs or anyone else's AUs, with bits and pieces and Undertale together, smash them all together to make the ultimate version of Undertale. It's gonna be a thing. I mean, honestly, that is really cool. I really can't wait to see what the community comes up with.
You are kidding me.
Someone made a mod of Undertale where you play as a freaking bedlump. I kid you not, it's an actual mod.
Oh man, this is like Undertale repainted all over again.
By the way, while I have your guys' attention, Jakei, if you're out there, please put Horror Tale Sands in Underverse. Yes, I know Killer's already in there. Please just do it anyway. Like, maybe as a cameo, or like, I don't know, he ends up in Horror Tale for a brief second. Something? Oh, by the way, at this point, since my channel is getting so big, I feel like any content I release on this channel is similar to the video I just released. So that being said, I feel like I should take all my piano covers and move it to a second channel so that, you know, I can separate the two. Because, I mean, I'm sure people aren't nearly as interested in my piano covers as they are in, like, development videos. So I don't want to spam everyone who has subscribed to me with a bunch of piano covers that don't even have visuals. I really need to get a tripod. Oh wait, I have one right here. Yes, I'm playing Megalovania right now. Cry more, internet. Well, that video took longer to make than I thought. Back to playing piano.